Well, good morning, everybody. Y'all can be seated. My name is Nathan. I'm on staff here at the church as well. And today really is an important day for us as a church family. It's one of my personal favorite days, this Pop-Up Sunday day, where we're not only thanking God for the families in our church and thanking God for the fact that we have young families. We got 3 other families next service that'll be doing the same thing. If you go, which you're not going to be allowed to because our security will stop you. But if you could get back, you'd see our nursery and our preschool and our elementary ages. Man, they're just bursting with life right now. And we've got some new 6th graders that are joining us in the service as people are popping up. Yeah, and that's great. But today really is a day we remind ourselves of the important work that we're doing as a church family to pass on our faith one generation to another. You may not know this. We actually have more generations alive right now, more generations alive at the same time than has ever been at least recorded in human history. There are 7 generations, or 6, I think. No, 7 generations that are currently alive right now. And I want you to think for a moment how remarkable that is. Think about the effect that has just on family life alone. In 1900, so a little over 100 years ago, the data shows us that only 6% of 10-year-old children had all 4 of their biological grandparents alive. So if you were in a class, a 4th or 5th grade class, you likely had no friends around you that had all 4 of their biological grandparents alive. Today, over 50% of 10-year-olds have all 4 biological grandparents alive. And most, I shouldn't say most, but many 10-year-olds will have a great-grandparent at their 10-year-old birthday party. This is a remarkable thing. It's a beautiful thing. It also can lead to a lot of awkward interactions if you're trying to help someone who's over a certain age learn how to text. If you have a text thread with them, like for example, you know, that crying, laughing face emoji. I've learned recently a lot of grandparents think that's a sad face. They think it's like a sobbing, crying, sad face, which leads to a text that looks like this. Don't know what problems Grandma has with Uncle Bob, but she wants to let everyone know. Now, it's funny when we're laughing at someone else, but the problem is this is now affecting me, these kind of misunderstandings. I was at a youth conference in November with our youth group, and they had a young speaker up. She was in her early 20s. She was great, but she kept walking around on stage and saying, every time I say something that you like, I want everyone to give me one of these. Everyone give me one of these. And I thought, okay. And she goes, we're just going to say clock it. We're just going to say clock it. And I thought, I don't know what's going on. But then all the teenagers are like, all right. And they're clocking it. They're clocking along. And I'm going, I don't know I felt like I'm having a stroke. I thought, what is going on? I look over at my 14-year-old daughter is there. And she goes, you're old, Dad. You don't get it. And I want to say, well, the joke's on you. I'm not old because I went to a Bruce Springsteen concert earlier this year. And I was the youngest person there by 30 years. So the joke's on you. I'm not old. But think about it for a moment. 7 generations sharing the same society. That affects nearly every aspect of life. Which, think about this. There's at least 4 generations in the workplace together. The larger companies, if you work in a larger company, there's probably 4 generations of people working in the same office side by side. We're going to have 4 generations running for office this November. 4 different generations. And we're going to have 6 generations that are eligible to vote. And so this is much different than just the slang that we use. There is wildly different ideas about life at work here. Think about it. You got people whose ideas of what it means to be an American or what it means to be a family or what it means to have work ethic or to handle finances. And all of those ideas for them were being formed either during World War II or during the Cold War. And then you got same people in the voting booth next to them whose ideas were formed after the iPhone was invented. We're not talking about small little differences in language. We're talking about vastly different experiences of life and the world. and what's going on. We're talking about more than slang. We're talking about how do we share a world, deeply held values that affect how we act in the workplace, how we act on school boards, how we act in neighborhoods, how we interact on the internet, how many of us interact in the same families. And it can make things complicated. But more than that, it affects how we're going to love our neighbors. As believers, we know that is it is the single greatest command. We love the Lord our God with all our heart, soul, mind, and strength. And Jesus said, equal to that is you love your neighbor as yourself. Well, how I love somebody who has a vastly different experience of life is very different from me. It affects how we share our faith in Jesus. You might have seen some headlines at some point that have come out that says that there's this Gen Z revival, Gen Z religious revival going on. I'm sad to say, if you've actually looked into most of those reports, those headlines are incredibly misleading. I don't have time to get really into the data on how all that works. There is good news about if a younger person gets involved in church, they're more likely to attend even than older generations on a weekly basis. That's most of what the data says. But the data is still pretty clear across the board that Gen Z remains the least religious generation in history. Only about 20% of Gen Z attend church regularly, and roughly 34 to 38% identify as a none, which means they're either atheist, agnostic, or they just say, I'm nothing in particular. And that is the lowest for any generation that has ever been studied in American history. Real feel-good statistics for Pop-Up Sunday. Here's the truth. I see this, though, and the reason I bring this up is I actually see this as a massive opportunity for churches. You probably wouldn't know this because you don't live in this world, but I do. The majority of churches in America really fit into one of two categories. There are legacy churches. These are established churches, usually about 30 years plus. And, there are some churches that have been around 150 years in this country. And those churches are primarily made up of two generations. They're primarily made up of baby boomers, if you remember seeing that. So people about 60 and up. And then you have some of the silent generation that's older. And there's handfuls of younger people at those churches, but by and large, everyone kind of sits on that end. Then there's a second type of church, which is church plants. Those are churches that have been planted in the last 20 years or so, newer churches, and they tend to also have two generations. They tend to have millennials, so people in my age group, and some Gen Z, some younger people, and then they might have some Gen X people, but they don't have many older people in the church. And so most of our churches are kind of just split down generational lines. And the few churches that do have multiple generations present in their church body rarely make it to what I want to talk to us about today, which is to being an intergenerational church. There's a difference between being a multi-generational church and an intergenerational church. What that means is a multi-generational church is a church where you have multiple generations who would call this their church home, but they don't interact all that much. You've got a young adults ministry and a seniors ministry, and you've got a singles ministry and a married couples ministry, and everyone kind of fits into their own little spot. No one ever really has to deal with one another. We can all show up and tolerate one another for a while, but we don't ever really have to interact all that much. A recent study reports that about 19% of Christians say their church intentionally provides opportunities for cross-generational interaction. And the reason why is because it's just easier not to. It's just easier to, everyone kind of segregate off into people who are like themselves. When you want to build a church or sustain a church, the easiest way to do that is you market, you program, you communicate to a single demographic. You pick a ideal person and you go, that's who we're kind of working towards. And that can be ethnically, that can be economically, and that can be generationally. It is much harder to work towards what we've talked a lot about around here of being multicultural, multi-ethnic, and beyond multi-generational, truly intergenerational. Because what that requires is every person in the church has to accept it's not about me. Not everything that happens is going to fit my lifestyle or fit my preferences. It's not always going to be convenient for me. It's not always going to be comfortable for me. But we've been saying for a long time around here, we believe there is a genuine gift of God that is found in multi-ethnic, multicultural, and intergenerational community, where each person brings all that God has gifted them with, whether it be their cultural background or their personality or their talents or resources, or in this case, it could be the wisdom they've gained through years of following Jesus, or it could be the energy and the optimism of youth and coming in with new ideas. Everyone brings what they have, and God's the one who works it all out in the process. He's the one who weaves us together into a family. Younger Christians can grow up in the faith with spiritual parents, spiritual grandparents in the faith who can guide them and support them. And where younger believers, their voice is heard. And when they come in with new ideas and with energy and optimism, someone's not walking around going, that'll never work, we already tried it. Someone walks in and goes, we love your energy. We love the idea you have. Yes, we have a place for you to be a part here. And what happens is, in that process, not only do younger generations get wisdom, older generations get new life breathed into them. And there gets something brought about. And what we end up seeing is God is working in every season. And God is working in every generation. What it does is it allows a church to stay rooted in the wisdom of those who have walked with Jesus throughout their life, but always being a place where new life gets born on a regular basis. And in all of this, God is the one who gets the glory, because when we lay down our preferences and we lay down our comfort to share our faith among generations, we develop a legacy of faith that points beyond any individual generation to the God who is the same yesterday and today and tomorrow, a God who has been the dwelling place of believers throughout every generation.
Christianity is not a faith that we discover for ourselves. It's a received faith, meaning the core truths of what we believe, the story of Scripture and of Jesus' life, death, and resurrection, and the core practices of life with God, like worship and prayer and studying the Scriptures, they're not things that each person or each generation figures out for themselves. They are handed down to us, and our job is to receive them. And it's important to understand that Christians believe that these weren't invented by human beings thousands of years ago. The truths of Scriptures, the teachings of Jesus, the traditional practices of life with God, they were first handed to us by God. Long before there were ever Christians, God was interacting with human beings through the nation of Israel. God had made a covenant with a man named Abraham. He promised to make Abraham, who at the time was childless, into a great nation that would bless the whole world. And God fulfilled this promise. He grew Abraham's family into the nation of Israel. But within a few hundred years, this nation was enslaved in the land of Egypt. And the people began to cry out in hopes that the God who made a promise to their ancestor Abraham would hear them, and he did. God freed them from slavery in Egypt, and he told them, I will take you as my own people, and I will be your God. Then you will know that I am the Lord your God, who brought you out from under the yoke of the Egyptians. God's desire was a relationship with Israel. He wanted to be their God and for them to be his people. God's desire was to dwell among them, to bless them by protecting them and providing for them, and also for them to love and honor and serve him in return. And so God brought Israel out from Egypt to a mountain in the wilderness to hand to them the way they were to live in relationship to him, what is most commonly called the Law of Moses. God spoke the law directly to the people of Israel from the mountain, and then he had Moses write this law down on stone tablets that would be kept in the center of the community. And before God led them to the land he had promised to bring them, he told the people of Israel, fix these words of mine in your hearts and minds. Tie them as symbols on your hands and bind them on your foreheads. Teach them to your children, talking about them when you sit at home and when you walk along the road, when you lie down and when you get up. Write them on the door frames of your houses and on your gates, so that your days and the days of your children may be many in the land of the Lord swore to give your ancestors, as many as the days that the heavens are above the earth. God is saying, just as I handed these words down to you, you must hand them over to the next generation. You must teach them to your children. You must talk about them regularly. You must write them down and create daily habits wherever you go of passing this on to your children. And it's important to know that the words that God wants each generation to pass on to the next is not merely the commands of God, though it includes them. He isn't saying, make sure your kids can quote the Ten Commandments or pass a test on each law in the Bible. He's talking about the story of Israel, how God freed them from slavery in Egypt, provided for them in the wilderness, delivered them to the promised land, and dwells in their midst. It spoke the story of God and the commands of God. This is the word of God, and we're told that this generation passed their faith on to the next generation, as Joshua took over from Moses as the leader of Israel, and God led them into the promised land. The people received the land God had given to them, and they lived faithfully in that land for one generation. Because then we're told, after that whole generation had been gathered to their ancestors, another generation grew up who knew neither the Lord nor what he had done for Israel. Then the Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord and served the Baals. Within one generation, the whole thing was lost. And whether it was one generation failing to pass it on or another generation failing to receive it, the outcome is the same. The people turned from God to do evil. And the rest of the book of Judges is about how far the nation fell away from God. And throughout the Old Testament, this is the pattern we see. One generation receives the word of God and takes seriously honoring God, being faithful to him alone and living in obedience to his commands. But eventually they fail to pass it on. And another generation comes that turns away from God. And this pattern repeats, and it seems like the whole nation will be lost. But the story wasn't over.
So as we just sang about there, years after Jesus' death and resurrection, the church is growing, but many of the believers are struggling to hold on to their faith because they're facing persecution. And so one early church leader named Paul ends up writing to a church in the ancient Roman colony of Corinth, and he knows they're under the pressure of faltering between their allegiance to Jesus as king or their allegiance to the empire of Rome. And so Paul writes to encourage them by saying, "Now, brothers and sisters, I want to remind you of the gospel I preached to you, which you received, and on which you have taken your stand." Now, I think what's important I want you to notice here for today is this gospel, and Paul goes on to explain the gospel very much in the way that we just sang a moment ago. But he says this is something you received. The faith that you're standing on, this central thing that holds your community together, it's not something you made up. Which means there's nothing all that special about you that you found it and other people didn't. What that means is everything you received, someone had to pass it on to you. Someone had to tell you the good news. Somebody had to embody the good news to you. He says, you received this from me, but he wants you to know, I didn't make it up either. He writes, for what I received. So what I passed on to you, I received. That's what I passed on to you as a first importance. And what he's saying is, everything that I told you is something somebody told me. Everything that I received, everything I have to give you is something somebody else has given to me. Now we know he received this from other people, but he received it directly from Jesus as well. But Paul goes on throughout all of this to give like this chain of evidence, and I'm not going to go through it, but he says, hey, you can have confidence not only because you received this from me, but because of the testimony we received from Peter, and then he mentions the 12 disciples and James and all the other apostles who saw Jesus risen from the dead. And then he also says, oh, and there were 500 other witnesses who all saw Jesus rise from the dead. And the point he's trying to make here is this is the pattern that we see in the stories of Jesus' resurrection. One person receives something, and then they pass it on. They pass on the news. And here's why this matters. All those statistics I said earlier, all of us see the trend of decreasing church involvement and faith life in our country. And just so you know, that's not just in younger generations. It's in every generation. Baby boomers are attending church less frequently than they ever have before. I think at about 15% less of baby boomers. Every generation is doing this less and less. And we want to know, for those of us who this matters to us, we go, how are we going to reverse this? How are we going to do something different? How are we going to turn it around? We want it for our kids. We want it for our grandkids. We want it for our friends and our neighbors and our coworkers. We want to see people come to know Jesus and to love Jesus like we have. But it is really vitally important that we get clear. This is not going to happen because of a new program we start, or a new initiative that gets launched, or some new idea that's going to give us a new methodology to get this done. This isn't going to happen because we vote the right way and get the right laws passed and get everything going in the right way in the public sphere. If we want to get Jesus to younger generations, to people in our life, it's going to be what it's always been. People who have received faith, who have received life in Jesus, passing on to somebody else what was passed on to them. It is what we're calling this series. It is going to be one life at a time. It's going to be one person at a time. It's all of us taking seriously our responsibility as followers of Jesus, that if I have received something, that is not just a gift to me, it is an obligation to me to pass on to someone else what I have received. And in a world where younger generations are less religious than ever, we need every generation to pass on to the next their life and their faith and their devotion to Jesus. And so today is Pop-Up Sunday. This is the day we celebrate parents who are doing that difficult work, doing that important work of passing on to their children what they have received. But this is also the day where we remind all of us, all of ourselves, well, we all take on the responsibility that we as a church, we don't only want to support you as the parents in this, we want to be an intergenerational church. We want to be a place, not just a collection of young adults and a collection of seniors and married people or single people and who happen to gather together on Sunday and we can all sit in the same room, but we don't really have to do anything with one another. We want to be a family of people of all generations, intentionally building one another up in faith. What I mean by that is not, hey, we need to have a killer children's ministry and we need to have a killer student ministry. It's just knocking it out of the park. Though I think what Shay and Becky and Jennifer and their teams are doing is incredible. I don't just mean that we need parents to buy in on this. Though parents, we need you to buy in on this. We need you to see what you've already, we saw 3 families commit to here, that it is our responsibility as parents to pass on to our children. Now, they're the ones who have to receive it. But it is our responsibility to continue passing it on as best as we can, passing on what we have received. We want our children to fall in love with Jesus and follow him fully. And that is what we do. And our team, just so you know, our family ministry team is always working right now. I'm meeting with them regularly. About every other week we get together and we're talking about, hey, how can we get teenagers more involved in the life of our church? What does it look like to help parents? We're coming up with ways to help mentor and train parents along this way. In a couple weeks, you'll hear Jason's got an idea that's a small step in this direction for some parents in our church, and we hope that you'll be a part of all of that. But this is bigger than what parents are doing. This is bigger than just what the people who serve in children and student ministry does. What it means to be intergenerational goes far beyond having great families and a great family ministry. It is truly being the family of God. It is every person in the church, every person, regardless of your generation, choosing, I'm going to interact with someone who's not like me, someone who is not in my generation, in such a way that God's life is able to flow from one generation to another and right on back. Because there are things we learn from one another. It is not just young people who need the wisdom of older generations, and it's not just older generations who need the energy and passion and optimism of younger generations. It's all of us. We need each other, because otherwise you get stuck in your own bubble. You get stuck in a bubble of people who sound like you and look like you and think like you, and it turns out everyone's got all the same problems. Have you noticed that? Everybody just goes, oh man, we all got the same problems. There may be a reason. There may be a reason behind that. The kingdom of God is much bigger than your worldview or your childhood or your experiences or the way you grew up or your opinions of how things should be. It is a beautiful tapestry of old and young, rich and poor, every ethnicity and culture bringing in treasures, as Jesus would say, both old and new. He's bringing in all kinds of wisdom into each other's lives, which means we need people of every generation. We need people of every generation involved in our family ministries. We need people of every generation passing on to another generation what it means to be loved by Jesus, what it means that he could actually be your friend. But not just for our children. We need older generations who would support and encourage parents who are in the midst of doing this, offering the wisdom of the things you got right. But if you ain't got a lot of that, that's okay, because you can pass on the wisdom of all the stuff you got wrong. And that's okay too. All of it is wisdom. And see, here's the truth. We need young families who will respect and will serve and will include older generations as honored family members. I mean, in a world where increasingly family life is becoming fragmented. Imagine a church where everybody gets cherished and nobody gets forgotten. Nobody gets excluded. Everyone is involved. What does it take for us to be this kind of community? It's very simple. It just takes choosing it. Someone who just has to say, this is what it's going to be about. It's not going to be about me anymore because I already received. If you've received it, that means it's time to pass it on. So what does that look like? Well, it might look like getting involved in our See Kids ministry. Now, I know what some of you just heard is that we're going to lock you in a room with a dozen rambunctious 8-year-olds every Sunday and expect you to teach them everything about the Bible. That's not what I'm talking about. First of all, we care about these children way too much to lock them in a room with you. We care too much about what we're teaching them about Jesus to just let anyone get in there and say anything they want to. We already have an amazing team of volunteers and leaders who not only will walk beside you in this, they'll train you for all that you need, but they'll be there with you one step. No one's left in a room alone with a bunch of kids to figure the whole thing out. Second, I'm not asking for a lifetime commitment from you. What I'm asking for is one Sunday. We do this thing around here, we call it a first serve. You're committing, hey, I'll try one Sunday. I'll try one Sunday. And then after that Sunday, you can let us know, that was terrible. Or what I think will happen. In fact, this is why I'm so confident I don't need to ask you for more than 1 week, because what I think you will find is that this is not only easier than you think it is way more of a joy to you than you imagined it would be. And it would become so addicting to you that you could be involved in the life of people. And you could see what you're doing is making a difference, that you'll want to do this as much as you can. And there's no age limit on this. If you're older and you're thinking, well, that's for all the young people to do, and they get in there and take care of the kids. Well, just so you know, about 1/3 of our See Kids volunteers are at retirement age or older, and they're there every week. And they're showing up, and they're killing it. And the reason why is because children, and many people don't know this, children often will gravitate towards the oldest person in the room who will pay attention to them. The oldest person in the room who will listen to them. They need spiritual grandparents to build into them. But if you're younger and you got kids at home and you're not even thinking about doing any of this because what you're thinking is, this is my one kid-free hour of the week and you're about to throw more kids on the plate. One, I'm not trying to take away your hour of worship each week. In fact, it's better than that. I'm asking you to give me another hour. I'm asking you to give me one extra hour on a Sunday where you could actually serve someone else's kids in the way that someone else is serving your kids right now. Because here's another thing, and I knew this at the time, but the research keeps bringing out. I did youth ministry for years, and this is the thing I said all the time. Research still proves this out. One of the most crucial things to the faith life of a child is that there would be at least 1 to 3 people the age of their parents, but not their parents, who their faith life matters to them and the child matters to them. That if they can look and say, that person right there, they're like my parents, but all the stuff my parents say I don't want to listen to anymore, they think all the same stuff. That person has a pivotal impact in the life of a child. And so we need you as well. Even if you're raising kids right now, we need you involved in the life of this. And if you want to be a part of that, on that next step card, you can just write the word first serve on the back of it. Fill it out. I'll reach out to you this week. I'll help you walk through the whole thing. But I also want to make clear, this is bigger than just how we're building into the children in our church. It really is about how we share life together. We need every generation caring for every generation. And so in September, we're going to be launching a new series, a new semester of small groups that will be starting up. A lot, you don't know this, but our staff has been working for about a year and a half now, redesigning the way our small groups go. And one of the things that was kind of on our agenda to get it done was what I've been talking to you about today. We want to create environments that regularly older and younger generations are interacting together. They're sharing life with one another. They're sharing their faith with one another. They're able to inspire one another and encourage one another and relate to one another. We are not looking for a group of young parents to get together and vent over how hard it is to raise preteens. Now, I'm currently in a group that's like that, and I love you guys. But I will say this, have you noticed we all got the same ideas? Because we're all in the midst of it right now. We're not looking for a singles group that just basically becomes a meat market for dating. We're not looking for more seniors groups so older generations can share prescriptions. I don't know what you guys are doing in there, but we're not just looking for more seniors groups or more young people group. We want to create communities where people can share life with people who aren't their exact age or their generation or their ethnicity or their social demographic, and you might actually learn what does it mean to love one another like family. And so maybe your next step is you need to fill out that next step card, and you need to check the box that says, I'd like information on joining a small group. If you fill that out, you drop it in the white box as you leave. I personally will reach out to you and talk with you about what it looks like to get connected to a group when they're going to start up in September. Or maybe you're just new here. This is your first Sunday. Your next step is probably not any of that. Your next step is you just need to come back. You need to take that 3-week challenge. You need to check us out for 3 Sundays and see if this might be a community you'd want to be a part of. Or maybe you've been here a little longer than that and you just need to take the small step of that 1-hour Next Steps class where you can see what it's like to get involved in the life of our community. And you can sign up for all of that on our Next Step card as well. Maybe God, though, has brought a specific person to your mind or a specific next step in mind for you in all of this. I want to give you a few moments to talk to him about that. Fill out those cards if your next step is on there. And then after a moment, our band will come and he'll lead us in singing praise to God for the good news that we want every generation to know. So let's take a moment to talk to him now.